About a year ago, I set out to convert a Kawasaki KLX250sf to electric. The idea was that this would be a, quote, quick and dirty, just get it done build. I'm going to throw it together as fast as possible. Well, that didn't quite work out, and after a bunch of issues, including a blown motor due to poor quality control on the part of the vendor, where the terminal lugs of the motor were improperly crimped due to the nylon covering not being clean and causing a ton of resistance leading to a fire, I finally had a bike that was rideable, but because I got lazy and used a battery pack that really wasn't intended for an electric motorcycle, a 20 amp hour LiPo battery pack that I used for a ridiculous e-bike build, this quick and dirty build was kind of impractical because the range was very small, and even if you weren't riding very far, the voltage sag in the battery pack would cause the controller to cut out. So I went back to the drawing board. I picked up a couple of 47 amp hour Samsung EV modules and put them together in series to make a 24S 47 amp hour or 4 kilowatt hour battery pack in the 3D printed case. Check out the full battery pack build video in the description below. While that was going on, I was trying to figure out how to arrange all the components in the bike. I also wanted to add an onboard charger and ended up building a steel mounting bracket that would hold the battery on top and the charger on the bottom. The mounting bracket was also supposed to play a structural role in the frame. However, I quickly realized that in order to get everything to fit, I would need to cut the frame to make room for the charger. This obviously compromises the structural stability of the frame in an area that's pretty critical. But I figured I could make up for the structural instability by welding a bunch of crap all over the place. The interior was filled with some thick steel plates, and then I figured I would reinforce it on the exterior with another steel bracket. With that incredibly critical portion of the frame 100% structurally sound because of high quality welding to the point that I never think about it cracking suddenly and sending me to my death during a ride, I started work on a skid plate to protect the controller and also to allow me to seat the bike in a motorcycle lift. Because this is pretty heavy and I don't want to keep taking it in and out of the bike. It's just going to be pretty unwieldy. I built this 24S 1P battery pack. So this is just made from lead Ocala cells, just cheap cells. I put 24 of them in series. I've got a active balancer on here, so for charging, because I didn't want to put a BMS for this. This is an older model of the case. This is just a spare QS10 connector that I have in here, and that's just connected to this wire, and then I can connect this here, place this battery pack inside of this case, and I just put some foam in there so that it stays put, just like that. They have exactly the same form factor as the real battery pack, but it's a lot lighter. And I can plug the actual discharge lead in the place where it goes and do all the testing without having to deal with this battery pack. So here's the bike with all of the components mocked up in place. I have the 3D printed motor in there and the testing battery pack, but everything is pretty much mocked up like that. That's where it's going to end up sitting. Then behind the battery pack is going to be the place where all of the switching electronics will sit, like the contactor, the fuse, and the shunt. So these are sort of big bulky things, and I think I found a pretty nice place for them. I added some steel plates to the mount that came with the contactor to provide a place for mounting the shunt and the fuse. For the charger port, I'm thinking I'm going to place it right here. So it's going to sit under the seat basically. The seat will come over the top, and on the left side you'll have this port. And here's my mount that I cut from aluminum. Here's the charger port in the bracket. Again, I'm going to have it sit just right about here. Here's the basic mock-up of all the components with some high voltage wiring in place. Those are 4-gauge wires for the discharge connector. The positive is being connected to the fuse, and the negative is running down to the shunt. Next, I started work on the 12-volt wiring, and also on a plate to run the gap from the seat to the frame where the tank used to be. I wasn't sure if I wanted to actually build a tank and maybe just leave the plate there with the gap because I thought it looked kind of okay. But I definitely wanted to cut some holes in that plate for the shunt display and the USB port. Here is the bike with the 12-volt system and high voltage system in place for testing. So I don't have all of the mounts on there that should be holding the battery and things like that. It's just the wiring that I set up to test the 12-volt system and the high voltage system. I have this plate up here, and that's I'm probably going to build a tank around it. I probably won't keep this open, although on some level I do kind of like that look, sort of a faux tank. But I'll probably put some plates over here to make a full tank. Right now it just has the shunt display right here, USB port, and I've got the wires running underneath like this. So I did a lot of work to add these little steel rings to the frame, just welding them on the frame and on some of the mounts up there so that I can attach zip ties and then run these wires. And then these are all of the exposed wires. I'm not going to leave them like this. I'm going to wrap them in some heat resistant tape and then put them into conduit. So the wires are just running this way. And then this area has all of the electrical components. But right now, we can just do a quick test of all of these components. So this is the CT22 display. And if I turn the bike on, you can see the display working. I've got the low speed and high speed switch on here. So that's normal, eco, and sport mode. Then the headlight is working. Then we've got the high beam. So when you flip the switch, you get the high beam and you have a high beam icon here. Then we have the turn signals. The CT22 display, actually the turn signals don't flash. They just stay on solid, which is kind of cheap, but that's good enough. I'll probably never use them anyway. Then I've got the horn here as well. And the horn is actually placed in a nice position this time. It's just mounted right there underneath this skid plate. And over here, this is actually a box, 3D printed box for all of the wires. This is a slide cover, just slides on and off like this. And then all of that just goes in there. So then this is the contactor. When I flip the contactor, I actually wired that to this light. I'm sure that's not supposed to be used for a contactor. I don't know what that is, like a hazard light or maybe just the general lights or the brake light. I'm not sure what this icon is supposed to be used for, but I wired that to there because you can visually confirm that the contactor is engaged on the display. So when I flip the switch, you can obviously hear the contactor connect, but I don't want to rely just on hearing it. I want to be able to see it as well. And now that the contactor is engaged, we can spin the motor. now here's the whole thing with the wiring harness and all the components and wiring mostly in place. Just wanted to show some of the routing here. I'm going to cover this up with conduit, and this is the high voltage wiring. So I've got my QS10 connector running with some conduit over here. The negative side is running down. Again, I've got some conduit to protect it from this narrow space over here. And that's running to the shunt down there. Then this is my negative ground junction up here. I've got my fuse in there. The positive side of the discharge connector is connected to the fuse here. On this side, I've got this wire fragment that's connecting the fuse to the contactor. And then that's running down here through that pass through and down here where the controller will be. So all of these wires are going to be placed into a conduit as well. And then this is going to be the connector for the charger, which is down here. I'm going to paint this black as well. All right, here's the bike with a lot of the wiring wrapped and put into conduit. This is kind of a lot of work, pretty tedious, but I've got the conduit running here. This stuff I got to do something about still. And I've got the conduit running down here. And then this area is all nice and compact. I've got a lot of the wiring that's running through there. Definitely a very tight spot, and I wanted all of it to be secured, and it is. You've got the charger port up here. There's the ground junction underneath there. You can see the fuse and the connector for the 12-volt system. Then I've got these are all the wires for basically everything but the phase and power wires go through this conduit, and it's attached to the frame here. So this is nice and secure. Then you've got the phase wires running over this way. There's going to be another connector there on that screw. And then all of those things are again running through that pass through. And then coming down here and then into the wiring box up here. But of course the phase wires and the power wires will both go to the controller. And then all the other wires will be placed in more conduit and attached to the rear side of this mount with these mounts over here. Here's everything from this side. You can see the main discharge connector running down here like it was before. There is the fuse with the cover on the fuse. And then this is the charger connector that's going to be running here. Probably won't place conduit on there and just leave it like that. Should be fine. Everything is still running down there. I've got this conduit attached here. And then on this side, I have this orange conduit for this side. I just don't have a black conduit that size. I don't hate the way it looks, but I'll probably replace it with a black one. And then up here, I've got it attached, but I'll probably place some more conduit on this part. I've said conduit a lot lately. Conduit. Oh no, I dropped the bike. Oh, what am I gonna do? Just kidding. I have it on the side right now because I have anchors made on the back of the motor mount, if this would focus, right here and right here. All of these wires, I want to wrap them in some conduit and then attach them to the back of this plate here. All right, so here are all the wires coming through the pass-through, and I have them in the conduit connected to the back of the mount, and then they're going to be tucked into this wiring box along with the controller harness. All right, now we have the controller in place. You can see the phase wires are in the back. Every terminal has a rubber cover to insulate it. Then there is the conduit running with all the wires, and all those wires, in addition to the phase wire harness, are in this box. So the last thing I need to do is to put the charger in here. That will go in this area, and then I have to attach all of the mounts that actually hold this together, because right now this is just, it's not secured. So those are the next steps, and then we are almost done with this bike. 90% of the way done, 80% left to go. All right, here we have everything here with the wires nicely tucked away, and I also have the skid plate in place. So now I've also painted the charger to match, and the last step will be to place this charger into that spot. And now we have the charger in place. So all of the wires are going into the wiring box down there. Everything is in place, all the mounts are in place. The main mounts for this entire piece is in place here. Here's a look at the charger from this side. Everything's in place, and then I have the main DC output wire connected here with this wire clip that's connected to this piece right here, and that's going around. I actually don't have that going through the pass-through because I don't have room in the pass-through, so it's just kind of dangling in there, but I'll put some conduit on it and secure it so that it's protected as well. I also designed and 3D printed this sprocket guard because the last time I had it together, it was throwing chain lube all over the place, so this will help keep it clean. Then I also added this chain tensioner, which is made from a piece of aluminum that I TIG welded. My first functional TIG weld actually, and I think I did a decent job, although far from perfect. All right, I've got the chain on, I've got the sprocket guard in place, everything is in place and secured, and now it is finally time to remove the test battery pack and put the real battery pack in its place. All right, now I have the real battery pack in the bike. Everything is ready to go. This bike is now rideable if I were to put the seat on it, but I still have to put the tank on. That's it, this bike is done. I've got everything on there. It is rideable. I think it looks pretty cool. I've got some of the old plastics on here, so I think that looks really good. The one thing I would say I could have done better is the tank. You can see the fabrication on this isn't exactly professional caliber. That's definitely something I have to work on. Maybe I'll give it another try and try to make something a little more professional looking. This part came out good, but once I started getting to these pieces, it kind of got out of control. This is all sort of bent and hammered into place, but not so bad. I think overall it's a good job, and I did just want it to be functional. I'm not so focused on the aesthetics right now. Here's the bike with most of the original plastics on. I think it looks pretty good. I gave the plastics a coat of flat black spray paint to match the rest of the bike, although I left the front fender and the headlight cover glossy black, but it kind of works. And check this out, that space under the tail just has so much room back there. It really just begs for a second battery pack to be put in that space. I also swapped out the Enduro tires for these Supermoto style road tires. I mainly ride on the road anyway, and the other tires didn't match in the first place. Overall, I'm really happy with the way this build turned out. I think it looks really cool, it's really practical and functional. The range is good, as you'll see in the next video where I actually ride this bike. And although this didn't turn out to be the quick and dirty build that I originally intended, it actually didn't turn out to be so dirty, unlike your mom.